Okay, it's recording.
Hello and welcome to our group debate. We've chosen the question, should same-sex schooling exist? This is a very deep-rooted topic of discussion as it dates back many decades to the overarching patriarchy of society, with the instrumental roles of men and the expressive roles thrust upon women to segregate education and employment based on gender. Throughout history, boys and girls have been separated in education, and within the UK, girls were only admitted to mixed-gender town schools at the time in the late 18th century. Originally, same-sex schooling was introduced to help girls do better in the class and remove gender stereotyping, and therefore, we view this as a controversial issue. Surely today, society has made drastic progression in gender equality and sees gender as harmonious. Due to this, we've chosen to debate this issue as we query why schools that abstain this sense of harmony exist. We hope that we can enlighten you further on this matter so that you can make your own executive decision at the end as to whether this format of education should be allowed. To do this, we've organised each group member to display their side of the debate. Mollie Turner, Mollie Hutton and Ella Gillard will argue the for side of the argument, followed by Laura Orgar, Ella Thomas and myself, Morgan Cooch, representing the against side of the debate.
There are many advantages of single-sex schooling that we are going to discuss throughout this debate. Firstly, I'm going to address the fact that there is a range of supporting evidence to suggest that single-sex schooling improves academic attainment and attendance. It is often the case that when boys and girls are together within the classroom, that distractions arise. Boys are often louder and more opinionated than their female peers, leading to female students feeling uncomfortable in the classroom and not wanting to voice their opinions. This then means that female students are not wanting to attend school, and therefore attainment is decreasing, whereas girls in an all-girls school will feel equal and comfortable around their peers, and not need to worry about being judged for speaking in front of their peers. There is lots of research surrounding the higher attainment of students within a same-sex school or university. Females in a single-sex school score a quarter of a deviation higher than their counterparts in a co-ed class, and for boys in a single-sex class, they are less distracted and more willing to spend time learning rather than socialising. A second point I'm going to discuss for why single-sex schooling is important is that girls and boys require different learning styles due to the gendered physiological and psychological differences. For example, boys have a shorter attention span than girls, and the amygdala, the part of the brain that responds to emotional stimulation, is larger in boys. This possibly provides an explanation for the more aggressive behaviour of boys. This is different from the more calm behaviour often associated with girls. Classrooms are also traditionally more suited to the learning of girls, where long periods of sitting and verbal emotive activities are more prominent. This is not accommodating the more impulsive, kinesthetic, spatially orientated learning preferences of boys. This leads to the disruptive behaviour in the classroom. Therefore, single-sex schooling is important in order to benefit the learning of both boys and girls.
My first point is to disagree with Mollie. I think single-sex schooling is uninclusive and isolating to the LGBTQ+ community. The points about it being physiological and psychological difference as members of the LGBTQ+ community do not really fit in. Transgender and non-binary people do not fit the physiologically standard categories such as boy, girl. Being different in any school as a teen can make you a target for bullying. Sadly, suicide is the third leading cause of death in adolescence. Gay teens are 4 times more likely than straight teens to commit suicide. A survey carried out in 2009 by the Gay, Lesbian and Straight Education Network found that approximately 90% of gay, lesbian, transgender or bisexual middle and high school students reported being physically or verbally bullied. Being segregated into single-sex schools not only increases the risk of bullying for being different from their peers, it also increases the risk of mental health problems developing and the risk of teen suicide. Not only are the teens that are being bullied at risk of mental health problems and risk of suicide, also people that witness this bullying going on in the school are also at risk of developing mental health issues. Most children in single-sex schools are in private education these days, some boarding and living away from home from their families. This increases their risk of developing mental health problems and increases the risk of suicide to them because they're not surrounded by their family and support network. The child or teen may not feel comfortable talking to a teacher. My second point is that single-sex schools stereotype gendered roles. Single-sex schools only fuel the stereotyping of gender roles in their schools. In the past, girls would be taught to become ladies with finishing schools designed to turn them into respectable ladies ready to find a husband. Sewing and cooking would be the main subjects. At the same time, men were pushed into sports, politics, science and mathematics. This is a very Victorian style of education and severely outdated today. Boys being pushed into gender-specific subjects and roles does not give them the freedom to explore other subjects and career paths. Out of the highest paid fashion designers in the world, 5 of them are men. Names such as Giorgio Armani, Ralph Lauren, Dolce & Gabbana and Valentino Giovanni are household names in fashion and all men. The same goes for chefs. Gordon Ramsay, being a top British chef known across the world for being excellent, is male. Boys should have the same equal access to all subjects and topics and have the same opportunities to explore their interests and talents. The same goes for women. Out of 892 Nobel Prize winners since 1901, only 48 of them have been women. Only one woman has ever won the Nobel Prize more than once, Marie Curie. Out of 13 Nobel Prize winners in 2021, not one of them was a woman. Girls are not getting the same access to STEM subjects, even in co-ed schools. The equality that women have been striving for since the 1800s is still a very long way to reach for true equality. Single-sex schooling only perpetuates this outdated notion. This topic was even depicted in the TV show The Big Bang Theory, highlighting just how few women ever win the Nobel Prize, when character Amy Farrah Fowler was up for a Nobel Prize in physics, just showing how relevant this is today. When these girls and boys go to university or further education, they are more likely to enter a co-education setting. Single-sex schooling does not prepare them for this big leap in their development. Boys and girls have problems socializing and have not had the chance to do so at a younger age. There's far too many occurrences at university of women being sexually assaulted. Look at the Sarah Everard's case last year. Women do not feel safe around men, even in this day and age. Men not knowing how to appropriately act and having never had the chance at school contribute to this. This is as much about learning social rules as it is about learning self-control. In the workplace, men and women will most likely be working together. Developing these social skills and having had the opportunity to do so at school can make a big difference to the workplace harmony.
The first benefit I am presenting for the advantages of same-sex schooling is counteracting gender stereotyping within STEM subjects and promoting gender equality and confidence for female students. Same-sex schooling can help break the stigma within STEM subjects for female students, therefore counteracting gendered stereotypes surrounding them. Same-sex schooling can help increase values of self-esteem and self-worth, along with female students having increased levels of motivation to achieve and succeed in STEM subjects, also increasing their confidence levels within these subjects. Counteracting stereotypes within same-sex schooling for STEM subjects can be done through many ways. For example, making sure that schools provide a full and engaging curriculum for their female students, and not just providing them the quote-unquote feminine subjects that they may feel like they have to pick in a co-educated school. Therefore allowing their students to be engaged with the subjects that they are taking, instead of them being pushed towards the traditionally seen by society as the feminine subjects. Having a full curriculum in a girls' single-sex school will allow them to have a more enjoyable and fulfilling career in the future and help them balance the male-dominated STEM careers. A second advantage for same-sex schooling is the increase of achievement in GCSE point scores. The first graph shows that girls in a single-sex educated school can achieve and perform nearly a quarter of a grade higher than their female counterparts in a co-educated school. The second graph shows similar data to the first graph, whereas the first graph is expected average GCSE point scores for multiple subjects for single-sex and co-educated schools for girls. The second graph looks at GCSE point scores in just science GCSEs between these two schools. Spielhofer, Benton, and Shagan highlight in their 2004 article they identified that female students who attend a single-sex setting could be expected to achieve and attain over 1/3 of a grade higher than the females who attend a co-educated school in science subjects. Through looking at both these graphs, it can be suggested that single-sex schooling can have a small but positive and impactful effect on girls, fostering higher performance and achievement. highlighting the benefit and importance of single-sex schooling for GCSE performance and achievement.
So we were also interested to investigate whether single-sex schools had better academic achievements compared to mixed-gender schools. It was incredibly clear that the answer was no. PISA, which stands for the Programme for International Student Assessment, researched into which countries in the world are the highest academic achievers. They provided tables and graphs to represent their findings from 2018. They looked at specific subject areas, including reading, mathematics, and science, as well as an overall ranking. The evidence was consistent and clear. China was constantly the highest achieving country in terms of overall academic achievement, as well as all specific subject areas. Following China, with overall high success rates across all subject areas, were Singapore, Estonia, Finland, and Japan. The lowest scoring countries were also consistent, with the Dominican Republic, Philippines, and Panama being at the bottom of the ranking list. It is important, of course, to note that these three countries have between 25% and 40% of their population currently living in poverty, which means less children are in education, or if they are enrolled, they have low attendance, meaning their scores on statutory tests are inevitably going to be lower. So how do the aforementioned points come into the argument of single-sex schooling? Well, we know that in China, there are only 9 single-sex schools in the entire country. So with the knowledge that in China, there are around 514,000 schools, that means that only 0.000017% of the schools in China are single-sex schools. It's evident, therefore, that single-sex schools do not create more academic students compared to mixed-gender schools. To compare to Saudi Arabia, which falls in the bottom 15% of the PISA ranking, almost 80% of their students attend single-sex schools. So it's incredibly clear that single-sex schooling has no impact whatsoever on academic performance. Another area I looked into was gender stereotypes and sexist attitudes of those students who attend single-sex schools. UCLA, a university in America, shows the findings of an investigation into attitudes of gender and sexuality of those who attend single-sex schools and those in mixed-gender schools. The results concluded that generally, those students who attend single-sex schools maintained and exasperated gender stereotypes and sexist attitudes, compared to those in mixed-gender schools who didn't have the same attitudes and beliefs. The researchers concluded that this is likely due to the segregation of genders. During developmental processes, these students have not had the opportunity to socialize with members of the opposite sex on a regular basis, internally creating fear and apprehension, which is often shown through anger, rudeness, bullying, and prejudiced attitudes towards the opposite sex.
My research focused on how same-sex schooling benefits boys. As Ella just rightfully said, gender stereotypes can have a negative impact on a student's life. However, same-sex schools has a more positive impact specifically on African boys. A study conducted by the National Educational Longitudinal Survey of 1988 analysed within African culture, a lot of pressure is placed on teenage boys to impress women and find a good wife for them when they leave school and have a family, which puts the importance of school below their personal lives. In this culture, drugs and violence are often abused within schools, which puts a negative label on Black boys and also lowers a teacher's expectations of them, even if they haven't shown any violent behaviour. By separating the sexes in schools, it gives the boys the chance to fully concentrate on their academic journey, as the abuses of violence, drugs, and materialism aren't as apparent. A later study made by the sociologist Cornelius Riordan in 1994 supports this claim by stating that the same-sex Catholic schools that provide extra support for ethnic minorities were almost twice as effective as mixed-sex schools, especially within the science and maths. My second argument on why same-sex benefits boys is through a study by Christian Dussman in 2009 that took South Korean students from mixed-sex schools and placed them in same-sex schools and vice versa for 12 months. The students in the study were aged 17 to 18 and found that students that were in same-sex schools outperformed students in mixed-sex schools by 10% across the subjects Korean, maths, and English in the exams at the end of 2009. In South Korea, mixed-sex schools didn't start to emerge until the 1980s, and only 5% of South Korean schools were mixed-sexed in 1996. Since then, the number of mixed-sex schools have increased by 40%, but same-sex schooling is still favoured. One of the reasons why this is because in same-sex schools, there are no distractions from the opposite gender, which gives the students the chance to maximise their grade opportunities, which good grades are considered extremely important in many Asian countries.
Now, as Ella just mentioned, there is speculated research that exists that is allegedly proven to statistically highlight that same-sex schooling results in greater academic achievement and even higher levels of confidence in pupils. However, this simply isn't the case. Upon researching Nagangast, Marsh and Howe's article on the effect of single-sex schooling in the final years of high school, to which 29 girls' schools, 22 boys' schools, and 33 co-educational schools were subsampled, it was concluded that on matters of achievement, motivation, and social benefits, little evidence proved gender segregation in achievement and education was necessary. This study was done on 2,379 students, and so this large and in-depth sample size from one research project truly sheds light on the discussion that globally, there is no well-designed research that exists to prove that same-sex schooling increases academic performance or higher self-confidence. Furthermore, it stated that the effects of segregated schooling based on gender are small at best and statistically non-significant once pre-existing differences are taken into account. Overall, it raises the question whether this form of schooling is worth continuing. Schools predominantly tailor their focus to student well-being, assessment results, league tables, and their wider reputation, and the little evidence for positive effects of single-sex schooling decipher that this form of education is a waste of time, effort, and finance. Moving on, in terms of the greater conversation of this debate as to the ineffectiveness of same-sex schooling, I undertook research to pose alternative issues within education that are actual more valuable and rewarding use of our time and money. Foreman and Kelly's 2017 book, Inclusion in Action, highlights a variety of methods and strategies that we can all use in schools to combat the lack of diversity and inclusivity of pupils. One key area that was focused on of many was whether SEND students should have the right to be taught in the classroom and not removed or segregated to alternative special needs schools. Above all, there are simply too many issues amongst the education system that require our greater need and support. Additionally, closed-ended issues like this, same-sex schooling and whether it should exist, we've acknowledged that on matters alone of statistical evidence regarding this, with the research also that there is actual no need for this format of schooling, and subsequently this argument is not one worth fighting. Moreover, teachers by today's standards are expected to provide diversity in the classroom. The term diversity may refer to students' cultural backgrounds, social and family backgrounds, ethnic origins, ability level, or functional level. Therefore, children of all communities and backgrounds deserve the right to learn and flourish. And it starts with the data that shows that classrooms today will likely have one or more students with SEND. UNICEF's Article 22 on the rights of the child states children with disabilities have the right to live with decency and dignity and play an active part in the community meanwhile. And so, therefore, we should endeavour to turn our attention to greater and more prevalent issues in society like this moving forward. This movement has the potential to be a transformative resource for the inclusivity of SEND pupils in mainstream education. So think about whether this was your child. Surely you'd want what's best for them. It starts with your voice. So let's illuminate this topic in education over one that's a battle that simply has already been won.
As a group, we decided to investigate the topic of single-sex schools because we agreed that as a society in 2022, we mostly feel that any person of any gender is capable of the same things. So we question the purpose and need for single-sex schools in the modern day. Overall, we have now discussed numerous pros and cons of single-sex schooling, highlighting various aspects such as academic achievement, gender and sexist attitudes, and unnecessary segregation. As a group, we collectively agree that even though there are some arguments and research studies suggesting that single-sex schools can be effective, we feel that single-sex schools are purely segregating pupils based on gender for no reason. There are far too few benefits of these schools to warrant the separation of young people, and we've discussed why we should turn our attention to other issues that are arguably more important.